So, we're happy to have people who outside the Ethereum community come to talk to us. So that's just a little bit of background on how we got the Avalanche guys here. So Emin is Associate Professor of Computer Science at Cornell and CEO of AVA Labs. Kevin, I think, is going to participate as well. Is that right?
This I mostly.
Okay. Well, at least you know now that Kevin is in the back in case you have other questions.
Yes.
So Kevin is Chief Protocol Architect and also PhD student at Cornell. Let's see, any other fun things? I noticed you worked on Plan 9.
I did.
On your Wikipedia page.
A long time ago. Does anyone remember Plan 9?
Whoa, I've read it, but I don't remember it from being live.
It's just about the coolest OS ever built, right? Right? The people who know, they know. It came out of AT&T. It was Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie, Rob Pike, David Perzotto, the crowd who built Unix, ended up revisiting Unix and trying to build it even better. And it never took off commercially, but it's one of the coolest, cleanest, most elegant systems ever built. I was lucky to have spent the summer there. I ended up having a fun career. I ended up being at fun places at the right times. In 1997, I was at DECCirc. They had a project called, what was it called? Not Each to Each, that was the recommendation system. I think it was called MicroPay or something like that. They had a micropayment system in the 1990s that didn't go anywhere because the banks killed it. And then I did Karma. So, we're talking about when people got into crypto. I built the first proof of work system in 2002, way before Satoshi. But I didn't have the brilliant insight on the consensus protocol that Satoshi had. Anyhow, so time passed and I did a bunch of stuff. I did a whole lot of things related to Bitcoin and its security. I would like to think that I'm not an outsider to the Ethereum community. I played a role in the DAO hack. I called it before it happened. And got very, very close to finding the actual bug that the hacker actually took advantage of. And then played a role in the aftermath and so forth. I've been called the guardian angel of Ethereum, right? So back when it was small. But anyhow, so these days I'm working on something new, and I want to share that with you. And this is a smallish audience. Feel free to stop and interrupt, and let's have a very interactive discussion. The more interactive, the more fun it is for me. But let me sort of give you the big picture, because I didn't know what audience to expect. And this audience turns out to be all OGs. So, like the first couple of slides, you might get bored at. But let me just sort of sync up. Let's kind of get to, you should know where I'm coming from and what my values are by the end of the talk. And that's important. So, here, I want to really talk to you about this new infrastructure for blockchain 3.0. Okay, so that's what I really want to get to. But to understand blockchain 3.0, we need to start with where we are today. And we're at a very interesting point in time. The word blockchain has become a special kind of a word. It's become a word that doesn't require an article. Right? So if you're walking around in lower Manhattan, you see two people in suits, and one of them turns to the other and says, "What's your strategy for blockchain?" Not a blockchain, not the blockchain, just blockchain. And the only other word I know that gets this treatment is the word God. Okay, so this is kind of a special treatment. And so that's great for us, right? And lots of money has gone into this area, about $8 billion of VC money. So up and down this particular highway over here, those people have put in $8 billion of it. But much more importantly than that, that's just Silicon Valley VC money. Who cares about what happens to that? But this is interesting. I think this was, I updated this just a couple of weeks ago. It's actually, I think, $28 billion of hard-earned, actual people's money. So ICOs have raised quite a sum. And the entire space, of course, it changes. These slides are a little old at 2 weeks or 3 weeks, so that it's far in excess of that. We even reached, I think, $700 billion. So we need to understand what's going on. Oh, actually, there's one other thing that's really crucial, at least to me, that I actually track, which is, when I feel like, am I in like some, am I living on campus and kind of out of touch with what the regular people are thinking about? So one of the things I check is a social indicator. And what that is the number of songs people have written about the topic. And if you look at how many songs have been written about Facebook, about Google, you sum them up, And then to that you add the number of songs people have sung about free software, which is actually something that gets people going, right? Gets me going. You sum those three up, you multiply that by 10, and then you get the number of songs that people have written about Bitcoin. This stuff gets people excited. There's something really interesting going on. What's it about? Why are people so excited? It's not about an append-only log. The reason why you're here, you're not excited because people are adding little messages to the end of a giant message log. In fact, people these days are not working on message logs, on linear chains anymore. Almost all of the cool kids are thinking about either directed acyclic graphs, graph structures, sharding, rich data structures. We always knew how to create a linear chain of events. That wasn't very hard for us. It's not about proof of work. Okay, so proof of work usually is pitched as as the thing that made it happen. Yeah, well, it's the thing that's behind Bitcoin, but proof of work is just a Sybil control mechanism. It's just one way of making sure that you are just one person and not masquerading as a million other people. There are many other proofs of X that people could imagine for Sybil control, for making sure that people don't pretend to be more than who they are. And it's not that got us here. That is not the exciting thing. Well then, and in fact, if anybody comes up and, like the Chia guys, and they tell you that, oh, I've got some proof of XYZ for you, that's really revolutionary, you can just look at them and say, you don't get what this is about. It's not the proof of space and space-time is not what's going to save us, right? It's not what was the breakthrough that got us here in the first place, and it's not going to be the next breakthrough at all. In fact, anybody who says that is not a clear thinker because they don't really understand what's really behind this. What's really important here, what I think is really driving this, is a shift in architecture. We used to build systems that were single shared, time-shared machines in the 70s. We replaced that in the 80s and the early 90s with client-server systems. And we saw that explode with the internet. The internet is just a bunch of client-server systems. We're clients of Google, we're clients of Facebook. And those guys control and determine what happens on the server side. What we're seeing now is a shift in architecture from client-server to peer-to-peer. From client-server where you trust entirely what the servers do, to a new architecture where there is no one in charge, you need not trust them, and they're not in a position of unilateral authority over your data and over how the service is rendered. That's the big deal. So this is really interesting, and it has all sorts of social, political, economic implications. It's going to change business models. So this is a coming-of-age story, very similar to how the internet emerged. So that's sort of the big dream. So where is this dream going? Okay, well, the dream is really compelling, right? So blockchain 1.0, as demonstrated by Bitcoin's success, was really something that captured the imagination of the masses. And the vision here is of a decentralized, disintermediated future. So those people who used to be gatekeepers, who used to collect rent from us, they need no longer be in charge. Okay, we can change this. And this is going to be an extinction-level event for many incumbents. Just think about the domain registrars, and then look at the Ethereum name service. Okay, so I don't know why I pay $11 a year for keeping track of what is actually a very simple entry in a database. I can imagine many different ways of replacing it, and ENS does a fantastic job. We're going to see that applied not just in geeky, sort of internally serving things like name service, but also in every other aspect of business, every other aspect of finance. Why should you pay money to Charles Schwab to hold your stock certificates? Why should you go to NASDAQ to exchange and trade your stocks? And there are a whole bunch of other things that we can disrupt. And that's going to cause extinction for incumbents. At the same time, it opens up a lot of opportunities for us. I am sure, given the number of OGs in this room, that quite a few of you are actually jockeying for position in this new economy. Because this new platform is really open, and the folks up and down 101 who know how to build client-server systems don't actually necessarily know how to build Byzantine fault-tolerant systems. So this is, they're moving in, right? Libra is coming, right? And others will be behind it shortly. But this is a huge opportunity for us. And the bar is low. The bar to success isn't really impossible, right? We need so what can we do? Suppose we did nothing. We did nothing except we provided a better interface to banking. Then we will have succeeded. Up until recently, in fact, since the 50s, the fanciest thing you could do with your bank was write a check. And if you want to get super fancy, the bank would let you write a post-dated check. That's about the max you got. And now you can write a smart contract that says all sorts of things. I would like to give you money for your movie. Here's my $5,000 donation, assuming you can raise $5 million for the movie, or else I want my money back. There was no way for me to express this before, and now there is. That's a fascinating thing to be able to do. Or forget that, maybe take a look at custodial assets. What if I don't have to trust somebody in full to hold my assets on my behalf? What if I don't have to pay them rent on a day-to-day basis? That too will be a huge success for us. Or decentralized trustworthy exchanges. Why should I have to rely on Wall Street? And there are layers upon layers upon layers of auditors to make sure that I'm getting a good execution. What is there to protect me from the Flash Boys and the HFT crowd? Could we build better systems to actually provide strong guarantees on this front? All of these will be successes, and we have yet to achieve them. The problem, though, is the current technology we have cannot get us there. Blockchains are super compelling, the new business models are super interesting, but the technology doesn't match the dream. And in fact, I would say that there are a whole bunch of problems that I would characterize under the categories of scale. So at, say the Bitcoin speeds of 3 to 7 transactions per second, or Ethereum speeds of 15 transactions per second, we just can't get there. At 3 TPS, you get to run IKEA on a Saturday. Okay, that's about the speed of it. You're not going to take over the USD. You're not going to come up with a new financial system for the world. Security is a huge problem. And for a long, long time, people have washed their hands clean and said, oh, you lost your coins, sorry for your loss. Right? It's your stupidity that caused the coins to be lost. And there has to be a better solution on that front. The performance, I alluded to scale and performance already. Governance is a huge issue. Like the Ethereum community is grappling with this as well. And we don't have the structures that are emerging yet to even reason about how to govern chains. And of course, the user experience is absolutely abhorrent. Anybody who's installed MetaMask and dealt with the whole mess knows this. Now, I need not belabor this point to this audience. If you look at Bitcoin acceptance among the top 500 merchants, this is the picture, 5 to 3 to 4, so it's kind of floundering. Okay, so this thing is not exploding like wildfire. And the narrative around these coins is changing. In fact, if you look at Bitcoin, the goalposts are moving on any given day. It is, one day it's digital cash, the next day it's not digital cash, it's digital gold, and you're not supposed to use it. And then one day it's for the unbanked, and then the next day it's for the rich, right? It's not for poor people. I'm quoting, I don't know who I'm quoting anymore because they kind of merge into one another, all of those maxims. So this is sort of the shifting landscape. And people tell you to hodl. Okay, so they don't want you to use their coins because the underlying technology is not capable of supporting heavy use. They want you to hodl it like stamps. And I was just at this hotel down the street where they have a stamp collection, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, these are kind of like ERC 721 tokens, right? And you can have like a whole bunch of them, and they're cute. And the funny thing is, of course, they want you to hodl while they themselves trade super actively. Go into any of their Telegram groups, and they're always talking about pumping, dumping, pumping, dumping. Look at Tony Vase. What's he spending all this time on? What are the core devs spending their time on? I don't think it's actual development. So this hodling, there are other collections that you can have. You can have bug collections like this, and so on and so forth. None of these are really interesting to a techie like me, and I think of a lot of you here in Silicon Valley have a tech background. I think this is not where we want to be. Okay, so there is this whole thing about how these systems are compelling because they're decentralized. Well, my group did one of in fact, as far as I know, the only peer-reviewed study on decentralization in Bitcoin. And the finding was a little depressing. So this is showing us the number of mining pools in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so the number here is the number of the amount or the percentage of the blockchain that this many people have determined. So if you look at this, it looks kind of like, essentially the story is, the Bitcoin blockchain is created by about 19 mining pools. An Ethereum blockchain is created, it's 99 point whatever percent of it, is created by about 11 mining pools. So that is not a high number, right? So if you think that, oh, Bitcoin is really cool because it's censorship resistant, how is it censorship resistant? There are only 19 entities. Does law enforcement not know how to send 19 subpoenas at the same time? I assure you they do. They round up hundreds of people all at once in one morning. This is not a problem for them. So the censorship resistance is mostly on crypto Twitter and in people's minds and in actuality. We all make fun of EOS for being a centralized funny thing, but they've got 21 block producers. Yeah, we can talk about the cartelization and stuff. But 21 is a larger number than either of these numbers. So, no, we need to get to a lot higher numbers. And this is not fully decentralized at these rates. Now, why is this happening? Well, okay, so yeah, so the story here is it's happening because this is how we built these systems. We built them based on Satoshi's vision. We built them using proof of work. And that was the best way we knew how. We wanted to build open systems that allowed anybody to come in. We used mining, and that made sense. And, but sadly, mining lends itself to centralization. And people do collate or sort of coalesce around, around certain mining pools, and we have the situation that we have at the moment. I need not belabor the point to this audience, but usually there's some confusion in the audience's mind about proof of work versus proof of stake, and they see them as two different things. They are much more similar than people realize. Proof of work is carried out by mining rigs, and mining rigs are a form of stake. So to mine, you have to have bought a whole lot of rigs that are very expensive. And the problem with mining rigs, though, that makes them inferior compared to actual stake, to proof of stake, is that one could use a mining rig to mine on one coin, attack that coin, kill it, take the mining rigs back, and use them productively on another coin. We saw this happen during the hash wars. We saw this happen with Bitcoin, Satoshi Vision, BSV versus BCH. We saw this happen with Bitcoin Private. We saw it happen with the NiceHash attacks against various coins. So in contrast, proof of stake requires you to put some money into the game. And if you do attack the coin into which you put your stake, you lose your stake. There is no taking it back and moving it elsewhere. It is strictly more secure than mining rigs at stake. So okay, so what else is sort of going on with this proof of work world? Well, one of the huge problems with the proof of work world is that it's unsustainable. The amount of energy that goes into it is immense. So just to put it in context, it's about 1 Austria worth of electricity being consumed for crypto, 2 Denmarks, 3 Irelands, or about 4 nuclear power plants. That's a heck of a lot of energy going into this. And so you could say, well, look, you know, I'm one of these extreme libertarians. I don't care about this as long as I get my money out. I don't care about the planet. I'm going to melt down the polar ice caps. I don't care. The bears could all die. The polar bears could all die. Fine, but those people typically also have the narrative that this thing should be a store of value. And you can't have a store of value if you're constantly leaking money out of your store. So what is going to happen here is, of course, at about a rate of a few $100 million a year, you're paying to an outside entity, the power company. So, what's next from here?
Are you really leaking? I'd like to unpack that statement because personally, I think proof of work, when people talk about cryptocurrencies versus blockchain projects, I don't think every blockchain project needs proof of work. But for a currency, there needs to be an external cost, something to peg to. And if you're burning energy, which is primitive, but it's the best we have.
No, I don't think that's true. So let me give you my reasoning for it. So it was actually a brilliant strategy by Satoshi himself to not peg the value of a Bitcoin to a measurable amount of work.
Yeah.
He could have actually had something like, to create Bitcoins, you have to solve 5,000 protein folds. Okay, and protein fold goes for whatever, like 25 cents a fold, right? So he could have done that. But had he done it, then there would have been established some kind of a correspondence between the work done and the money, the value of the coin. So he kind of broke that out and said, look, there's going to be some weird, useless hashing that we do, and we're going to create some coins as a result. And therefore, the value here could float arbitrarily. It doesn't correspond to any useful work in the real world. The fact that energy was burned does not provide a price floor for the coins. The price is determined solely by the intersection of supply and demand curves.
But you still have to burn that energy to do, because there have been projects that thought, well, maybe we could do primes, we could calculate prime numbers, that would be something useful,
Yeah.
or protein folding.
Right, protein folding.
But all these intrinsically fail because you can't figure out when the next one statistically might show up. So whereas here, we're burning energy, and it's the actual burning of those joules.
Yeah.
That's what I deem as an external cost center.
No, here's the way to view it. The coins have some price that is determined on the free market. And that is entirely a function of how many coins are outstanding to be sold and how many people want to buy them. So you get that point. So there's a supply-demand curve intersection. Now, how much energy you spend to make a coin is independent of this. So if that's a high number, then if the price, the actual free market price, is below that level, then you're in a position where miners will start turning off.
Yeah, it's a floor, not a ceiling. And so if you want to attack the network,
Yeah.
you have to spend that much energy minimum to begin the attack.
If you want to attack the network using mining rigs, exactly, it actually establishes some security guarantee for you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you a decentralization guarantee. The decentralization is very small, as we talked about. It does give you a monetary cost required to attack. You need to buy mining rigs, and the mining rigs required to attack Bitcoin is about 1 to 2% of the cost of the total system. Now compare that to Tezos, which is using proof of stake, and the amount of money required to attack Tezos with POS, or Ethereum 2.0 with POS, is going to be on the order of at least 35, maybe 50% of the outstanding full market value of the system. So POS is inherently more secure than proof of work in that case. And the money that is actually going to the mining is essentially being what? Imagine, okay, so the other way to view this is take gold, for example. And it costs something to take it out of the ground. And if the world doesn't want gold at the moment, you just don't go and get it out. The fact that it costs a hell of a lot to dig it out doesn't provide a price floor to the gold.
Well, I could build gold using an accelerator.
If we requested a technical talk,
I'm going there.
and I think that there's lots to go into about barter and fiat, and lots of things to discuss on this topic. We don't require it, but I'm willing to say this, we've covered this enough.
Okay, sounds good. We can discuss this afterwards. So this is a fascinating topic. It's a deep topic. But let me sort of give you what I see happening when I look outside at what's happening. So after about 10 years of this proof of work madness, which was great because it got everybody going and so on and so forth, people are slowly beginning to realize that there are all these drawbacks to these schemes. That they don't scale, they consume a lot of energy, they leak money. That is causing, or that has been causing for the last 2 years, a whole range of people to look into alternative consensus protocols to replace the basis that we have. And we're now seeing the emergence of blockchain 2.0 efforts. Almost all of these efforts are essentially attempts to go back in history and to dust off old protocols that we had from the 1990s and sometimes 1980s, and to repackage them in a different format. So if you look at Hedera Hashgraph, if you look at just EOS, if you look at any of these other, or what Tezos uses also for consensus, these are all in the classical domain. So let me maybe skip here and tell you a little bit about sort of the history of the distributed systems. Starting in the 70s, we ended up having two people. One of them is here, Leslie Lamport, just up the valley here. The other one is Barbara Liskov, both with Turing Awards. They defined the entire consensus problem and also defined the framework for thinking about this problem. They came up with a whole family of protocols that we call classical consensus protocols. Those of you who've heard about PBFT know this very, very well. Those of you who've heard about quorum systems, Raft, Paxos, and so on, these are all protocols squarely in this domain. Almost all of these protocols work by set intersection. That is, I would like to pass some kind of a law, and I want us as a group to make sure that we don't forget what laws we passed. So I say something like, hey guys, I would like to let's exit the EU, and I want this to be somewhat permanent. And so within this context, within this framework, Lamport and Liskov pointed out that one of the easiest ways to do this, or one of the best ways to do this, is to write to a large enough quorum to make sure that when other people read it, it's not lost. And typically what they do is they write to 2/3 of a set of validators, and they read from 2/3 of a set of validators, such that the intersection is always 1/3 of the validator set. And so therefore we can withstand attackers of up to size 33% or so. So this is very well established stuff. The problem with all of these protocols is that this approach is incredibly fragile. We have to all agree on who's in the room. So if I'm writing to this set and I'm writing to 2/3 of this set, and you're reading from not this set, but a slightly different set of people, then the intersections don't work. And then suddenly these systems break down. In fact, if you talk to Vlad, for example, Vlad Zamfir, he will tell you that he expects Ethereum 2.0 to have a consensus failure. He says it's almost guaranteed that we're going to have some. And that's an interesting thing for somebody to say, because he understands that this approach is actually quite fragile. Satoshi knew about the classical protocols, and he looked at them and said, look, this stuff, it's fine and all, but it's not robust enough, it's too fragile, it's not open. We all have to agree on the set of validators essentially ahead of time if we don't want to have discrepancies. And that causes the system to be closed. So what did he do? Well, he said, well, look, I'm going to come up with a different scheme, and he came up with these longest chain protocols based on proof of work. And that's essentially a history of all of the systems, right? It's a field that's been around for 45 years. For about 35 of those years, we had this approach. For the last 10 years, we had this approach. And people who are upset at this are going back and they're trying to dust off protocols from this era. But something very cool happened exactly a year ago. Not last May, but the May before. A group that calls itself Team Rocket dropped a paper called Avalanche that described a new consensus protocol. So that's only the third time in the history of mankind that we had a new consensus protocol family. I want to tell you a little bit about how this protocol works. It's actually fairly straightforward, and I can explain it, I think, in less time than somebody can explain how Bitcoin works to somebody who doesn't know how it works. Let's see. So the way this protocol works is that it's inspired by epidemic protocols or gossip networks, if you've ever heard of those terms, but if you haven't, it's not a big deal. It combines the best of Nakamoto consensus with classical consensus. So it's going to be robust like Nakamoto, but it will not be limited in scale. It will not be limited in performance like Nakamoto. It will have the efficiency of classical consensus, and it will scale like no other. So if I were to show one of these comparison charts, it would look kind of like this. It's robust. Let's see, Avalanche is robust like Nakamoto. It scales. It has very low latency and quick finality, very high throughput. It's lightweight. It's quiescent. And it lends itself to sharding and concurrency very well. So how does it work? Okay, so here's what we want to do. The consensus problem is, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what is the definition of scaling in the last slide? So why do you say classical protocols do not scale?
Classical protocols do not scale in the number of validators. So if you look at PBFT or any other protocol or hot stuff if you want, well, let's leave hot stuff alone because hot stuff is probably one of the best exemplars. But the typical, classical family requires all-to-all communication. So let me try to illustrate how Avalanche works and how it differs. So our goal is to pass some kind of a law and then make sure that it's permanent, that we all agree, right? So we would like to say something like, Alice paid Bob, and we'd all like us to know that now Alice's coins belong to Bob. Now, there might be multiple outstanding transactions. It might be Alice has issued a double spend, one to Bob, one to Charlie. We have to ensure that all of us choose the same side. It doesn't matter which side we choose, because neither Bob or Charlie know which one got accepted until we accept one of them. But we must all necessarily pick the same one. We have to all say, yes, it's now Bob's coins. Or we have to all say, it's now Charlie's coins. What we don't want to have is some group of us thinking that Bob has the money, and another group of us thinking that Charlie has the money. That would be a fork, and that would be a big problematic scenario. So, okay, how do we go about this? Well, we could use, let's see, what shall we do? Let's imagine that we're in the stadium, the 49ers stadium. That's not very far from here, I take it. And we have 100,000 people. Let's actually make it bigger than it is. Let's suppose there are 100,000 people in it. Okay, a very, very big stadium. I'm in it. You guys are in it. We know some people in it, but we don't know all the people in it. And we certainly don't see eye to eye on exact membership. You and I don't have the same view. We have a lot of the same people in common, maybe, but we don't have an exact view. Why? Because we're different people. And we observe the entry and exit of other people in different time order. And so to you, it might seem that Jeff is in the audience, but from my vantage point, I can see that he left. Right? So that kind of discrepancy is part of the model here and must be part of the model. Now we want to make sure that we all make the same decision. And let's say let's make the problem abstract. Let's say we want to pick between two colors, blue and yellow. Okay. So if we were to do this using proof of work, we would do essentially some kind of a random lottery, right? What's the random lottery? Like my typical example analogy for this is the kiss cam, right? So essentially, somebody does a mining job, and then he says, "Hey, I'm the winner. I'm the leader, essentially, of who gets to determine what happened in the last 10 minutes." And he says, "I'm picking blue." Right? It's essentially the same thing as there's a kiss cam. Says, "Hey, you got lucky, Jeff, and now you tell us, blue or yellow." And you are the sole leader. You collect the money for it, and you determine it. That's okay, but it has all the drawbacks of proof of work. We could use PBFT, or a classical protocol like PBFT. Now, those of you who know how PBFT works, it's going to require n-squared communication. So everybody will talk to everybody else. If I have 100 people, then 100 people can talk to another 100. This 100 squared is not just 10,000 messages. But if I have 100,000 people, 100,000 squared is some insane number. The network it'll take forever to make a decision. Let me show you how Avalanche works. It's just 3 minutes and it's easy to understand. I'm in the audience, you guys are in the audience in this giant stadium. And we all start out life preferring one color or the other, blue versus yellow. And let's say we start out in the worst case scenario. Half of us like blue, half of us like yellow. And we're all mixed up. So here's how Avalanche works. Each one of us randomly picks 5 other people. And I say, "Hey, what color do you prefer?" And you, and you, and you, and you. And I get back answers. I get back blue, blue, yellow, blue, yellow. So that's slightly more blues from my polling. And what I say is, okay, I poll the audience. It looks like the audience is tending towards blue based on my vantage point. I too will go blue. And you do the same thing at the same time, you do the same thing at the same time. In fact, the whole network does the same thing at the same time. Now you can see that if we started out life in a 50-50 split, after one round of this, it's incredibly unlikely that we will still remain at 50-50. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. What will happen, most likely, is I will oversample one of the colors. Right? That is, the network will oversample one of the colors. There will be a slight preponderance of blue or a slight excess of yellow. So instead of 50-50, we will move to 51-49. Either way, it doesn't matter which way we go. And if I repeat the process, then now I'm more likely to go in the direction I went a second ago. How much more likely? 51% more likely to go blue if I went blue in the first time. And so that will amplify that little signal. And if I do it again and again, I will go from 50-50 to 51-49 to 53-47 split. And I repeat it again, and I go to 55-45, and suddenly you can see that it's going to avalanche. It's going to go down this hill to a mode where everybody is the same color. So this shows it pictorially. All of these cells are polling 5 other cells at random from the rest of the matrix. And if I sort of slow, if you kind of look at what's happening, the network ends up going in one direction, and it kind of speeds up. And you can see that once everybody has adopted the same color, Alice shows up and says, "Hey, I've got the new color in my hand. I didn't pay Bob or Charlie, I paid David." the network will be like, no, 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 your coins are gone. We all picked Charlie. Those coins belong to Charlie now. If you were to try to introduce a new color, there is no going back. We will all sample, and we will all see that everybody's yellow, and then therefore, there is no going back. Yellow is the color that we picked. Okay. So, yeah. Yes, yes.
So as there are more rounds, right?
Yeah.
Like it's statistically almost guaranteed that the whole network will be on the same result.
Exactly.
But from individual node's point of view, right? Is there a way for it to know, to be sure that the entire network has reached the...
Very good question, and the answer is yes. So let me show you what this graph is trying to show, which I think gets to that point. So this is showing you the number of nodes in the network, which is 1,000. And here is the number of nodes that are colored. This was a red versus blue. Number of colors number of nodes that have adopted the color red. So what you see here is that this is like sort of the worst point possible, and so maybe it might be a bit better to sort of try to flip this in your mind. I should maybe have flipped this graph a little bit. But the bottom line is, as there are more and more red nodes, the network has more and more red. This is the 50-50 split. As you have more and more red, you start going towards this direction. And you go faster and faster and faster. And there is a point here after which the network is guaranteed to decide red. That is, the Byzantine component is unable to shift the network to the left. So imagine that you're in a network of 100, so it's easy to actually just talk about this point. If I have 100,000 nodes, imagine that all but one of them are red. Well, that blue guy in the next iteration will turn red. Imagine two of them are blue. Next iteration, they will both most likely turn, in fact, guaranteed to turn red. And so on and so forth, and you can go backwards, it becomes less and less likely, right? But there is a point at which the probability of achieving this state is virtually guaranteed. It's not exactly guaranteed, it's probabilistic, like Nakamoto, but it's virtually guaranteed. Yes?
So in your example, you said if Alice tries to pay David,
Yeah.
David will know that this coin is spent.
David, exactly. David will, yeah. And so, sorry, and getting back to your question, I didn't answer it. From the vantage point of a single node, if you are polling the audience, and every time you poll, all the answers are coming back yellow, then you're like, okay, well, this network has decided yellow. And I can now safely commit myself as yellow, because, clearly every time I look, and I ask everyone, where did the money go? Well, to the yellow destination. Okay, well, I'm done. So, and in fact, let me wrap up the thing that I was going to say, which is the number of rounds required to achieve that finality. This is the big result in the Avalanche paper. Right? There are a lot of people who roughly had this idea of well, there aren't that many people actually, but there are some people who sort of thought about this kind of a process. But the cool thing about this paper is it proves that this will behave in the following fashion. The number of rounds required to achieve finality is very, very small. 17 rounds or thereabouts for 100,000 nodes. That is almost nothing. And if you think about the number of messages, with proof of work, there was immense energy involved. With PBFT, it was 100,000 squared. With this, 17 rounds of 5 people polled. What is that? 85 messages.
I'm curious if you could give us some numbers. Is this like requiring, say, you need to exchange messages on the order to log the number of nodes?
Yeah. Yes.
So your results are assuming some specific details there.
Specific details of
like
a network that's
like the log of the.
Of a network that's between 10,000 and 100,000.
Okay. Yeah. But the messages need to be exchanged.
Logged.
You need to poll like more than the log, the number of nodes.
No, the number of nodes you need to poll, the number k, is constant, and small is actually generally good. This is a bit of a complex equation that I don't necessarily want to go into, but I will just say this: a number between 5 and 10 is ideal.
But I guess that
And it doesn't. Sorry. It doesn't change no matter how big the network is. You just pick a number. Let's say 5 or 10. Just make it round and nice. And that'll be fine. The number of rounds, the number 17 is log n. So the bigger the network. So if you go from 100,000 to 1,000,000, then that number goes from 17 to 18. Right? So every multiplicative factor causes an addition of 1.
But does the speed of convergence, does it not depend on the number of people you poll? I'm just curious.
Speed of convergence will depend on the number of people you poll, sure. Sure. And these graphs will look slightly different based on the k you pick. Suppose you make k to be n, then you actually approximate classical protocols using this scheme. That's sort of advanced, and I don't want to get into it right now. But that's a very interesting point, that you could actually derive classical protocols using this probabilistic foundation. So this is essentially a sort of, I kind of think of it as a more general version of what we had before. Everything that came from the Lamport-Liskov family could be thought of in some sense as a particular variant of this approach. Okay, lots of questions. Yes?
How sensitive is the convergence to Byzantine actors or to network partitions?
Good questions, and I don't have slides on this yet. So it all depends on, it's not sensitive on the size, it's not sensitive to the size of the Byzantine, The shape of this curve is independent of the size of the Byzantine component. The number of rounds required, of course, increases the larger the Byzantine component is. And so there are multiple different variables that you need to, as the system designer, you need to pick. So you're going to have some network of some size. So you need to decide, well, I'm going to target a network of size 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 and so forth. And then you get to pick the Byzantine component as well. Like you're going to say something like, the Byzantine component that I suspect will attack my system is at most 10%, or 20%, or 35%, or maybe 55%. And one of the interesting things about this protocol is that it can handle attackers that are larger than 51%, and maintain safety, but not liveness under such an attack. Okay, so this is really, really interesting, and it's not something that any of the other protocols are able to do. Let's see. Once you pick those parameters, then you go through essentially the calculations in the Avalanche paper, and it emits for you the number of times you need to sample the audience to be assured of a consensus decision within a certain safety bound. So you want to have a safety error once every 20,000 years. The same way, for example, when Satoshi did his calculations, remember in the Satoshi white paper, in the last section, he calculates the number of confirmations required based on an attacker of size 30%. So there's a similar thing that's going on here, where you say, okay, I'm willing to have a safety violation, every now and then, every 20,000 years. What's the number of rounds that I should poll the audience in? And if you pick that safety bound to be very, very small, it's actually lower than the probability of your CPU miscalculating. Right? So these chips from Intel over here, they miscalculate with some probability. They're also probabilistic devices. So pick a probability bound that's less than that, and then essentially you have finality in the protocol. So in fact, I kind of glossed over this, but one of the brilliant things that Satoshi did was step outside that Lamport-Liskov framework. In the Lamport-Liskov framework, you have complete 100% guarantee. Right? When the network says, yes, we exited the EU, then it's guaranteed. In Avalanche, it's probabilistic. In Nakamoto, it's also probabilistic. Right? Nakamoto tells you something, but then somebody could get really lucky for 7 blocks in a row, and then come up with a longer chain, and then revert it. Right? It could happen. It's just very, 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 very unlikely. Exactly how unlikely, it's in the last section of that white paper. And so there's a similar thing going on with probabilities in Avalanche. Yes?
Say, suppose Alice wants to give money to David. What prevents Alice from just spawning multiple nodes and surrounding David?
Very good question. Whatever Sybil control mechanism you like. So in Avalanche, the paper says, look, use whatever Sybil control mechanism. You could use proof of work if you really liked proof of work. So in fact, BCH, Bitcoin Cash, is doing exactly that. They have an Avalanche implementation based on mining. In AVA, the coin we're building on top of Avalanche, we're using proof of stake, pure proof of stake. So you put up your money, and so to launch such an attack, you need to put up a huge, a heck of a lot of money to be able to launch that attack. Alice would have to own, so if the network is configured for a Byzantine component of 30%, Alice would have to have substantial stake to revert that payment. And by substantial, I don't mean 30 plus a little bit, okay? All right, so I'm getting ahead of myself, but let me describe this other cool feature. I just got off the plane this morning, so I'm a little discombobulated, and we're kind of taking but I like it better. Like, this is a small audience, we can have it. Anyway, try. So here's the deal. In classical protocols, the bound is 33%. And if 34% are Byzantine, if they're evil, then they will revert decisions. They're guaranteed to succeed, right? If you have 34% attacker, that protocol is dead. That's why Vlad says, if we use this, et cetera, there's some discrepancy between the node's view, et cetera, and then suddenly there's a problem. In the Avalanche family, if the protocol is configured for, let's say, Byzantine component of 30%, and a safety violation of once every 20,000 years, and the Byzantine component turns out to be 31%, what happens? That's a very interesting question. And what happens is not complete failure of the protocol, unlike classical. What happens is a failure of the guarantee. So with 31%, you're not guaranteed to cause a safety violation, but you are able to cause a safety violation that is more likely than once every 20,000 years. In fact, at 31%, I think the numbers work out. Kevin has the graphs somewhere on this machine, but I don't know where to find them. It's going to be something like, if we configured for every 20,000 years, 31%, it'll probably take you once every 10,000 years to cause a safety violation. So to really win, that's why when I said it will require Alice to put up substantial stake, she might need to put in 50 to 60% of the stake to really cause a violation soon. Does that make sense? And this is one of the amazing features of this protocol that classical just doesn't have.
My question is, how do you agree on stake, right? If Alice says, I have so much money to David.
Yes.
But if David is asking, do you really have this money? It's a chicken and
Sure,
egg.
I see. That's very, very similar to long-range attacks on proof of stake that Ethereum 2.0 folks are dealing with as well. So in AVA, the way we're dealing with this is as follows. We are using what we call trust anchors. So essentially, when you start up, you ask all of the exchanges that you're going to ever interact with. You say, hey, Binance, according to you, who do you think is in the audience? Hey, Bitfinex, hey, Coinbase, etc. So you get a view of the entire network. You take all of the nodes that are majority vouched for, and you ask them how much money Alice has.
Vouched?
Yeah.
Vouched by?
Vouched by these trust anchors.
So it's not decentralized.
It is very decentralized.
Why can't they run BSP
So
for us?
here's a different way to say this. Remember, so essentially, in Bitcoin, when you boot up, you are also asking a number of people to give you the tail of the longest chain. And those people could lie to you, and they could construct a fake blockchain for you.
You need one honest person.
That's right. You need one honest person. And in the Bootstrap protocol for Avalanche, you need 51% to be correct.
Yeah, but
That's different. That's different, and it seems weaker, right? So the Bootstrap phase of Avalanche is indeed weaker than the Bootstrap phase of Bitcoin. But remember that Bitcoin, for its regular functioning, requires 51% of the network to be honest anyway. So
That's different. The network there is computation power, but here it is IP addresses.
okay,
In Bitcoin, you can have 99% evil IP addresses, but you can still bootstrap.
correct.
So that's not a fair comparison.
It's a pretty fair comparison. So you're right that the sets of nodes we're talking about are different, but the safety requirement for Bitcoin is that the 51% of the hash power is honest.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not exactly the same because we don't have hash power. But for Bitcoin to remain correct, you need 51% of the hash power. And for Avalanche, or not Avalanche, for AVA, the coin we're building, to bootstrap and function, the 51% of the trust anchors have to be correct. So those are, in my view, analogous. Not exactly the same, but analogous. And it's no weaker in the bigger general scheme of things. In fact, 51% of the hash power belongs to fewer people in Bitcoin
Oh, that's
than
true.
51% of the trust anchors.
As Karthik pointed out, then why not run BFT among those trust anchors, because you're trusting them anyway.
You can run BFT among the trust anchors, yeah, but then BFT has all these problems of being slow, not admitting enough many people.
We have different trust anchors also.
Yeah,
You and I have different trust anchors. I trust a different set of exchanges, I just assume that half of them are correct. You trust a different set of exchanges. They're not running BFT on each other, it's just a group strategy.
so the suggestion here is that if they were running BFT, then they would be our.
But we would have to agree on the set
We would have to agree on the set of trust anchors.
which then is a permission system.
That's right.
For 30,000
Okay.
each.
Let me.
The Bitcoin thing is a party trick, the one trust anchor. That's because otherwise, once you're in the system, it's just 51% of that.
So, let me, with your permission, are there more questions? Okay. Let me move a little bit further. I think I want to talk a little bit about the DAG structure here. Not that it's that important. Well, one thing we do in Avalanche, so I talked to you about these sort of color choices. I talked to you about the choice between Alice pays Bob versus Alice pays Charlie. And this is the Genesis vertex. So what we do in Avalanche, so what I gave you was what we call a single decree protocol, how to deal with a decision between this versus that. If we were to do this polling 17 times for each and every transaction, we felt that that would be too expensive. So what Avalanche suggests doing is coupling these decisions on top of each other, such that you create essentially a DAG, a graph, and then people vote on various different transactions within this graph in a way that if you vote yes on this, that you like this transaction over these others, that also confers a vote to everything that's upstream of you. So that way you don't have to vote separately 17 times on this transaction, and 17 times on this transaction, and 17 times on this transaction, and so on and so forth. Instead, you vote once on this guy, and you vote once on this guy, and this vote counts double, both for himself and his parents. So that allows us to be much, much, much more efficient than we would otherwise be. So I'm going to show you some performance numbers, and they're going to be sky high, and I want you to understand why. Okay, so let me talk about something else about this nice graph structure. It means that the network overall can actually divide the work, such that some set of nodes are growing one portion of the DAG, while other nodes are working on another portion of the DAG. So what that means is this protocol is naturally sharded. It's very hard to shard blockchains, right? So Ethereum has been trying to do it for years now. Other people have. My group has been trying to do it for Tezos, actually, it turns out. And it's actually a very difficult problem. And the DAG structure in Avalanche lends itself to concurrency really well. So the graph kind of can grow at the same time on different tips. So here is a set of performance measurements from a very old implementation. So this is the number of nodes. You can see that the performance of the system is independent of the number of nodes. These are real nodes deployed on Amazon. They're not simulated. They're not on a single machine. They're not fake little things that we made up. We're not doing Hedera-type trickery here. We're not doing Algorand-type trickery. We have Algorand, for example, when they report numbers, they have absolutely no crypto checking overhead. So in this particular measurement, all of those overheads are in there. And you can see that the scaling is essentially independent of the network size, as one would expect based on the math. And the numbers we're getting are far in excess of VSAT. So ask any Bitcoin maximalist, ask all those core devs who think so highly of each other, they will tell you, oh, Bitcoin 3 TPS, that's the best we can do. What are we going to do? Are we going to reach Visa? No. Well, we reached Visa. It's not very hard. Okay? You just need a better protocol. So these days, actually, these numbers have gone up. Our latest implementation is around 16,000 to 19,000 TPS.
What's the difference in the two colors?
What is the difference in the two colors? That's a good question. Is it two different parameters for the network? Do you remember?
I think it's one geo-replicating, one non-geo.
Oh,
Sorry, the latencies and one without latency.
Okay, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
So I think the lower one is the geo-replicated measurement, and this is that is with latencies between the nodes added. And I think this is the one where the nodes are running at full speed on AWS.
Is this a UTXO layer?
This is UTX, so it's Bitcoin.
Okay.
Right? So we're actually running Bitcoin script. All of these transactions are written and implemented in Bitcoin script. We just copied the entire code.
Is that your plan for AVA?
I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. Let's see. So performance, the latency is pretty low. What are we looking at? We're essentially looking at, as you can see, most transactions are less than a second. So in fact, the vast majority are less than 0.2 seconds, at least for this measurement.
Is this 17 rounds?
Say again?
Is that 17 rounds?
This is not 7. It's whatever the network size is. It's configured for 10,000 nodes, I think. So whatever the numbers come out to be.
What are the numbers?
It's somewhere around like 12, 13, something like that. So slightly smaller than 7. It was between 10 and 20.
Is it parallel or is it pipeline or is it serial?
What does that mean?
I mean, is the round 1, round 2, round 3, or is it?
All the nodes go concurrently at all rounds, and they're all building the DAG concurrently.
But my question is with rounds. Are the rounds?
Rounds are serial from the point of view. So if I'm a node,
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing a bunch of rounds successively. Not I can't do rounds concurrently.
You're not synchronous, I guess,
There's
synchronous, are you asking
Yeah,
if it's
yeah.
synchronous?
No, there is no synchrony here. The
I mean,
nodes run
No,
independently of each
I
other.
guess I asked, like, from a node's point of view, are the rounds sequential?
See, they are sequential.
So
They
this
have to
is
be.
20 milliseconds
Um,
per round.
20, approximately 10 milliseconds per round, yeah.
But what is the latency between people?
I guess it would have to be 10 milliseconds for polling about 5 to 10 nodes. So I think these numbers are coming from the AWS installation with 2,000 nodes. Given that latency, it sounds like that this is AWS without geo latencies added. With geo-replication, in this graph, with this bars, the slowest numbers I have ever seen in all of our benchmarks is somewhere in 1.2 seconds or so. So typically when I go out, I actually typically don't show this graph. There's just too confusing. I simply say between 1 to 2 seconds. So that's an approximate ballpark.
So just to be clear, the procedure is that a node polls
Yep.
his set of people,
Yep.
he's randomly picked, then he makes a decision, and then he goes and polls again immediately,
Yep.
without waiting. There's
Without waiting for anything.
There's no attempt for synchronicity or.
No, we do not try to synchronize. No, that would create, you can't synchronize with random people on the internet.
And I guess are you going to describe like if it's a block structure or something there in a second? Is that coming?
It's this
Oh,
DAG
you
structure.
were. I was thinking about other stuff. Sorry.
It's a DAG structure.
Sorry. Thank you.
Great. So, okay, so let's see. So, what are the, what is the security of this thing? So, I talked about the decentralization here. So, we're used to like very small numbers in this domain. This thing can scale up to, from 10,000 nodes to millions of nodes. This is obviously Byzantine fault tolerant. It can be configured to handle Byzantine components in excess of 50% by sacrificing liveness, but while maintaining safety. I think I talked about this. The classical protocols break down if the Byzantine component is bigger than 33%, and this one does not. The degradation is graceful. And if you think that your Byzantine component is very small, say 5%, then the number of rounds required for finality decreases substantially. So that's a very, very nice property. And the final thing I also mentioned, we don't have to all agree on who's in the system. We can have a fair bit of disagreement on who's in the system and yet achieve the same kind of guarantee. Yes?
So, but even if there's let's say if there's no Byzantine
Zero.
player here,
Great.
zero player, but from single point of view, so a single node, right? I cannot tell that how many Byzantine players are there, so I still have to wait for like 17 rounds because I don't know how many bad players are there.
Correct. So, at least the way I described it, I gave no description of a node trying to figure out who's Byzantine, who's not. You could add those, but we decided not to add them to AVA. So the way we're structuring AVA, none of the nodes make any effort to try to determine who's evil. there is no slashing conditions. Remember in Ethereum 2.0 and every classical based system, there is some notion of punishment. There's this carrot you hold out, but also there's the stick you have to have. And in our world, we don't have to have that. And we believe that money technologies ought to be sort of calmness-inducing. They have to be, you should be able to sit at home and be like, look, if I get hacked, I don't lose my stake. Or if my CPU misbehaves, I don't lose all my money. And I think that's something I would like to be able to think. So therefore, we have no notion of staking, and we have made no attempt so far, any detection for Byzantine behavior and punishment for Byzantine behavior. You could add them, and it would make the protocol strictly more efficient. Okay?
If I do not know how many people are there in the system, and if we do not even agree
You should
on
know
the
how many
membership,
people are in the system.
But
As
you
a
also
system
said
designer, you should be targeting a number.
But you also said anyone can join the system.
Yeah.
So in that sense, if we do not know, if we do not agree on any of this, I think some 10,000 people are, you think some other 10,000 people are.
Great, then you can have a problem. So here's exactly what the Avalanche paper does and what the system, the AVA system maintains. So you start out with the system targeting a certain size, let's say 10,000 people, and you select parameters accordingly. And after that, what you want to guard against is the entry of a large number of people very, very quickly into the system. That's the problem. If suddenly a whole lot of people come in and you see them and I don't, then we'll have a discrepancy. So the AVA implementation, in fact, the paper describes exactly what you need to maintain, which is you have to ensure that there's an admission step, and that admission step is time limited. So essentially what you need to do is when somebody, Jeff shows up and says, hey, here's my $1,000, I'd like to be a staker. If there's 1 million Jeffs doing this, then you have to say the first one gets in, but the rest have to wait a little bit. Okay? So that's what the AVA implementation does. It will sequence the entry of people such that this very crucial bound on how much discrepancy we can tolerate is always respected. There's a very, very specific and concise definition for how far apart we can be and what the time limit ought to be.
And I think, so if we start off with 10,000 people, the system designer, can the system ever get into a state where eventually it reaches 100,000 without us learning that it has happened?
No, that should not be happening.
Let's say slowly.
No, that should not be happening. No.
Why? So I think my understanding is no individual person has control over this. So
no individual has any control over any of those things, but as a collective. Okay, so here's what the system designer does. They configure the parameters for 10,000, let's say 50,000, 100,000, etc., etc. All they have to do is ensure that the rate at which people are admitted respects this discrepancy limit, and when the system reaches the next size up, it shifts to using the next set of parameters.
But how do I know when someone else has joined the system? So someone may contact you and join the system.
That's right.
How do I know?
Well, it's the same consensus decision.
So,
how do you know that Alice paid?
No, so we are trying to achieve consensus on the number of people or an approximate number or something along those lines.
Yes, correct. There is, as part of the DAG, there is a staking transaction that says, I would like to now join the system. Does that make sense? Okay. So the paper has a very good description of this. I mean, there are other questions you can ask, like, what if I have reached 50,000 and I think that I'm 49,999, whatever. It handles that case as well. Okay, so, all right, so what are we doing? We're building a new system. Okay, let me try to do this quickly. We're building a new system. It's called AVA. It's got a native token. This token provides the core security of the system. Staking nodes put up some AVA. Then they get interest by minting. So you essentially say something like, hey, here is some amount of AVA I put down as stake. I'm tying it down for a week. I will be participating in the system. And after that week is over, you get your your $1,000 worth of AVA back, plus you get some additional AVA. Okay, so so that's there's no slashing, no funds loss. I talked about this, which is if somebody wants to attack, they lose all of their stake, and so we build interesting things on top. So here's, I think, one of the most exciting things about the AVA platform that I kind of want to get across, which is, unlike everybody, so I talked to you about the consensus protocol. I gave you a very geeky talk and kind of jumped around a little bit because I'm sleepless. But there is much more to this system than the consensus protocol. If I were here just telling you about the consensus protocol, sort of giving you a wonky, hey, I'm a professor at Cornell, this thing is very fast, I'd be giving you a spiel that sounds like this is just a faster Ethereum. Okay? This is not just a faster Ethereum. It's very different. And it's different in the following fashion. If I look at all of the coins on CoinMarketCap, all 1,800 of them, pretty much all of them are in the same fold as the initial Satoshi code base, which is one coin, one scripting language, one network. Okay? So what is that? There's the coin itself, there's the scripting language that defines how the coin behaves, and then there's the nodes that implement that scripting language and that coin. You want to change how the coin behaves. You want to add a new opcode. Well, you got to talk to these people who run the network. And you know, one of them is Luke Jr., and he's going to tell you, hey, I'm in the swamp of Florida, I've got a Raspberry Pi, and I'm going to push back on all of the changes you want to make, right? And then you get the block size wars and the craziness that ensues. This is what everybody does. This is not what we do in AVA. We see AVA as a universe of many, many, many thousands of coins. Every stock certificate should be a coin. Every real estate deed should be a coin. Every piece of gold should be a coin. Okay? And you name it, it should be a coin. And there should be many, many, many different languages, scripting languages, and you get to pick. You can say, hey, this is Jeff coin, and it's going to have, it's going to represent real estate in the Bay Area, so adjacent coins can be merged. And I want ZKPs and ring signatures and Bitcoin scripting language. Right? So it's just a mix and match. But the most exciting thing is the network itself. You can say things like, Jeffcoin is supported by purple nodes. What's a purple node? Jeff determines the color. And so he can go out there and say, hey guys, I would like you to implement my coin, and he then pays those people to, for example, if he's doing real estate, he will probably have to pay them to keep archival records for, let's say, 10 years or so. Those people supporting the Jeff coin, the purple nodes, know what they're doing. They have a legal foundation. It's not just a volunteer network. And they can extract transaction fees commensurate with the service they're providing. They can say, yo, I'm keeping track of your deeds. You're not going to pay me 25 cents of a transaction fee. This is special. I'm going to be around for 10 years. I have a legal thing I signed with you. And therefore, I want $5,000 for this transaction. And that's possible in this network, in this universe. And it's not possible in any other coin that I know. So I'm very excited about this. And you know, our target audience is not to sort of try to get people over from Ethereum. You know, Vitalik is a very close friend of mine. That's the last thing I want to do. Or you know, get $5 more from like, you know, whatever, like Cosmos or whatnot. But it's instead to try to digitize the $3 trillion worth of assets that are not digital at the moment. So we have a very different tech. I don't see like IOTA, etc. These are not competitors to us. It's like they do their own thing. Bitcoin, you know, Bitcoin is just going to do Bitcoin things. It's probably going to spin its wheels for a while. So, you know, that's them. We have a different target. Yeah.
Which language are you using to develop this?
We have 3 different implementations. The Go one is the most advanced. We have a Python one that I initially wrote, and then we have a C++ one.
Is it open source?
Not yet. We have a private testnet. We're trying to go public testnet sometime soon. Okay, so let me try to talk about the last couple of items that remain. We have a governance system in effect. So here's one of the interesting things. Everybody who does one of these blockchains has to fix on day one a whole lot of parameters. So Bitcoin, for example, fixed this emissions curve, right? So it's every 4 years, it halves the number of coins emitted, blah, blah, blah. And you know how that goes. There will be at most 21 million coins. That's wonderful and all, but it's not always correct. Like, so Satoshi sometimes got it right, but sometimes he overmints and the price crashes. And if you look at, for example, Zcash, they followed Satoshi, they overmint like crazy. Ethereum, if you ask me, at the moment is also overminting. They pay for far more security for the miners, or from the miners, than they're actually getting. And they're minting too many coins. In AVA, anybody can use this protocol based on repeatedly polling the crowd to suggest changes to critical parameters. So you could just say, hey guys, you know, it looks like we have too much printing of the coin going on. Let's reduce the minting rate from 2% to 1.8. Or vice versa. We don't have enough nodes in the system. Let's up it from 1.8 to 2.0. And so there are governors in place. Again, we believe strongly in this sort of calm technology. So you can't go from 2% to 2,000%. It has to, these parameters only change by so much per time unit. So you can go on vacation and come back knowing that the system hasn't changed much. But at the bottom of it all, you do get to dynamically react to changes in the world by polling the audience. And that's very different from most coins. It's different from, it's kind of like Tezos, but in Tezos, everything is up for grabs. In Tezos, you say something like, hey, I have a new hash of a new module. Do you guys like it? And if everybody likes it, then that becomes the law. And the system could jump from one point of operation to another. In AVA, it's very limited. It's only a certain set of parameters, and they only change by so much. Again, this is motivated by our desire to be able to go on vacation, knowing that the system isn't going to change too much. Last thing I'm going to talk about is we plan to support, in fact, we currently support the EVM. We want to support other scripting languages like WASM, as well as other virtual machines. I talked about multiple virtual machines. And we're aiming for 1,000x higher throughput. That's exactly what I alluded to. So if Ethereum is getting 15 today, as I mentioned in the lab, we're getting 16K to 19K. I don't think the Go client will be able to reach those numbers in actual deployment, but our goal is to be able to exceed 2,000 TPS, ideally to exceed 5,000 TPS. One of the other things we want to support using this platform of platforms mechanism I alluded to are really large smart contracts and private smart contracts. So I want to be able to say something like, hey, I have a huge database, and I'm going to, I can't possibly distribute it across everyone, but I'm going to send it to, whatever, the green nodes that I pay to hold up my smart contract. Vice versa, I also want to be able to say, my smart contract is housed on gray nodes, which keep it private. It's got some sensitive data. I promise to you that the interactions with it will be correct. That is, you're going to be interacting with my data, and you'll be making changes to it, etc. The integrity guarantees are there, but there's also an additional confidentiality guarantee. That is, the gray nodes will keep the data secret. So if you have sensitive information like API keys that you want to embed into your smart contract, you can do it with AVA. So, okay, so what else are we doing? We want to build a community around this idea. It's sort of very early, in its very early stages. We only got some tiny amount of seed funding in February. We didn't do the Definity thing of sitting on it for 4 years. We ended up reaching private testnet last month, a month ago, or 2 months ago. And we are now looking to expand from here. So one of the things we want to do is create chapters in different cities. So I want to have an AVA New York, AVA San Francisco, AVA Silicon Valley, AVA this, AVA that, you name it, AVA Atlanta, AVA London, Istanbul, etc. So if anybody wants to get involved, we would be delighted. Just send us an email at contact@avalabs.org, and we're looking for volunteers who can help us essentially drum up support, get the word out about what we're building, and why and how it's different from what's going on. We're also hiring both developers and business people, and so if you're interested, do let us know. And if you just want to sort of passively follow what's happening, somebody started this one, I don't know which one. This one is the official one that I created, but this is the one that somebody else created. So anyway, so we have these 2 different Telegram groups. We're active in both. And then this is the Twitter handle that you can follow, even though we haven't tweeted yet. It's got a bunch of people following it. So that's it for the AVA vision. Thank you all for bearing with me. All right, it's super hot in here and I'm super tired, so I apologize for the non-linear discussion, but it was a great discussion, and I should have expected that Silicon Valley would be full of these super bright people who ask just the right questions at the right time. So thank you.
So